So good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Understanding that this is a virtual conference and there are going to be possibly quite a few people who are going to be joining from outside Houston, Texas, which is where me and the entire organization, uh, uh, the board of a Technology Collaboration Center is based. My name is Sudhir Pai, and I'm the Chair, Board of Directors of Technology Collaboration Center. My previous career has been pretty much all of it at world's largest oil and gas service company, Schlumberger. And right now I've transitioned into commercial aerospace and head robotics at Axiom Space. We will build world's first private space station. Today, the mission of the Technology Collaboration Center is to be the premier organization to solve the most significant technical challenges with the greatest societal impact. The center was formed in 2015 as a brainchild and interest of NASA Johnson Space Center, who was looking at various technologies which were available in the industry that they could look at, particularly related to the human health side, sensors, etc. As part of it, SAA, an agreement was signed, Space Act agreement was signed between NASA Johnson Space Center and the Technology Collaboration Center. The TCC, as it is called, short form, is a 501c3 organization. While the original plan was an agreement between the industry and space, very clearly it was seen that the interests go just beyond space. Similar kind of technologies exist in various other industries, and here was a very nice opportunity to try and see what happens in other industries. A very good friend of mine, and I'll mention his quote, which is, often the solution to your problem might be in your neighbor's toolbox. Out of that came the opportunity to partner across other industries. And what better place than Houston to have that kind of a network? We are the energy capital and soon to be the energy transition capital of the world. There are more doctors in 1 square mile called the Texas Medical Center. So in a sense, we are the medical capital of the world. And of course, with NASA and Johnson Space Center being based here, in general, we are also the space capital of the world. So one place where 3 major industries come together. Hence, our objective is to work collaboratively between the various industries to make sure that we blend creativity and collaboration and bring it to fruition. It's a member-driven organization, so we have members from all of the 3 industries joining us. And feel free to go on our website, techcollaboration.org, where you'll find more information. We have organizations like Shell from the energy industry. Of course, I mentioned NASA Johnson Space Center, KBR, etc. from space, and Baylor College of Medicine, etc. from healthcare joining. Of course, a strong focus on academia. So major academic organizations, Rice University, University of Houston have joined. And recently we had one more industry join us in the form of the Prairie View Agriculture and Mechanical University, who has a very strong focus towards agriculture and mechanical. Our programs are conducted in various ways. We have a collaboration concierge service. Those organizations who need a platform to reach out into the various organizations to find collaborations can come to us. We are a 24/7 program. Our program is not like 1 year in a day where we have a conference and then we step away. We are here consistently through the year arranging various communication methods, on-site seminars, interactive workshops, and strategic challenges. We'll be talking about the interactive workshops and strategic challenges a little bit later in today's 2-hour program. And one of the reasons to do that was, and I just gave one example, and I'll be talking more about it in session 3, imaging. The same technology, MRI. So when I first came out of university into the industry, one of the first things I did was imaged an oil and gas well. But you find that is the similar technology is used, whether it is in oil and gas or whether it is in healthcare or in space medicine. There are a lot of other themes like this, and we have a whole 40-minute session which is dedicated to that. So then we have an outstanding 4-part session today after my initial opening address and introduction. I will hand over into the next session to David Horso. He is our board member and from Champion X. He'll take us through perspectives on cross-industry as a panel and roundtable with some esteemed speakers, all of who are actively connected with the Technology Center. He'll then hand over as we go into the strategic challenges. We'll look at some of the key themes that we have had success with so far and some of our driving themes, not only in the past few years, but going on as multi-year strategic themes into the future. And finally, Sahana will join me in session 4 as we close out today's 2-hour session, wherein we'll see where do we go from here based on the discussions and the dialogue which happens in session 2 and session 3. I do want to thank you all for joining us. Please join in. And I want to recognize the three entities / people. First of all, I want to thank Tech Rodeo team for putting together such a wonderful program and giving us the opportunity to participate in today's session. Thanks to Houston Exponential. I want to thank our executive director, Mark Sangster, who has worked tirelessly in the background to make sure an event like this comes together well. And finally, I want to thank Sahana. She made that connection between Houston Tech Rodeo and our organization. And you'll see her as session 4 of today's program. Please feel free to raise your questions. Mark is looking into what you're writing in chat and questions which you are putting up. And this will allow us, the coordinators of our respective sessions, to answer questions that you might put up in connection with the esteemed panel. With that, thank you very much. I now hand you over to David. David, the floor is yours.
Great, thank you, Sudhir. Thanks very much. And it's a privilege to host this next session here. Just a little bit of an introduction. So my name is David Horso, I'm with Champion X. I lead our external technology strategy operation. Previously had many technology roles in global R&D teams for many years. Always been extremely passionate about external technology, what we can do by looking into other industries to solve problems rather than reinventing the wheel. So really passionate about this and very excited about this particular session we're going to have this afternoon. So without further ado, let's introduce our panel here. And we have 5 members on our panel today. We have Dr. Bella Patel, and Bella is the Vice Dean of Healthcare and Quality at UT Health, and also the Regional CMO at Memorial Hermann. So welcome, Bella. We also have Nagesh Rajal, who's Vice President of Research and Innovation at Clear Review A&M University, South Houston. Good afternoon. We have Larry Strader from Geo Control Systems, and Larry is General Manager down at Geo Control Systems. So welcome, Larry. We also have Montgomery Goforth. Montgomery is the Assistant Director at NASA JSC the engineering directorate, and obviously a lot of partnerships going on at NASA. And we have Haibin Xu, and Haibin is the program director for the Shell Game Changer GCXN program. And Game Changer has been around for many years, and Haibin has recently refocused that in partnership with the National Renewable Energy Laboratory to really looking at some of the step out challenges associated with renewable energy there. Mark, I'm going to just check with you. Did I cover everybody who is actually on the panel here? Have I missed anybody?
Yes, very well. And just for a couple of comments, we apologize about David's mic, unknown technical glitch there, but looking forward to the session.
Okay, I'll get a little closer to the mic. Thank you for the heads up there. Maybe it's a little bit easier there. Very good. So in this session, we really want to go into a little bit more details on the how. I think everybody is familiar with collaboration, but really this is to drill down into the how. How do you make it work? What are some of the roadblocks? What are some of the examples where it's worked extremely well? So let's jump straight into this. And we're incredibly fortunate here in Houston to have pretty much access to some of the greatest intellectual capital resources in the world. When you look at what Houston stands for in terms of aerospace, space exploration, the energy industry, the transition that is going on in the energy industry today, the healthcare industry, in addition to computing and data analytics, incredible intellectual capital here in Houston. So the potential is huge to be able to leverage that to solve some of humanity's greatest challenges. Maybe we'll focus the first question to Monty. I think that's from your perspective, Monty, what are some of the key elements you think that really needs to be embraced in order to realize this potential across Houston?
So I think I've kind of broken it into three key elements. The first being leadership. And I think the kind of leadership I'm talking about is the kind of leadership that got the Houston Ship Channel built. I think it needs to be focused on Houston. It needs to be aggressive, needs to be genuinely visionary, and it needs to have some investment behind it. And maybe it addresses infrastructure issues like Spaceport Houston, or maybe it addresses some of these key challenges you brought up in your introductory remarks. And that brings me to the next part of this, which is some sort of focus. We can't do everything and make great progress. So let's pick a few things, one or two maybe, that make sense and require collaboration amongst these different groups. For instance, we could pick alternative power as being a focus area for energy and aerospace, both. We have vested interest in both industries, somewhat different needs, somewhat different approaches, so there'll be some complementary aspects of it. We might pick anti-aging as something from an aerospace and a medical community perspective, since a lot of what we see in aging terrestrially is the same kind of things we see impacting our astronauts in space, right? So there's some synergy there. So the focus, the leadership, the focus, and then finally an enabling ecosystem. We've talked a lot in the past, over the last few years, about an innovation ecosystem. There could be a collaboration ecosystem, I guess. And I think we've made huge strides in that over time. But there are still places to be improved upon, one of which that really sticks out to me is the need for software development, software engineers, software developers. They are in tremendously short supply. They're tremendously valuable. It would be good if we could somehow enhance our ecosystem to be attractive to them and bring more and more software developers into this area. And that's probably extensible to IT in general and cybersecurity in general as well. But that's an area that I know we are suffering for the lack of. So those are the three: leadership, focus, and an enabling ecosystem.
Thanks, Monty. Maybe up to the panel, maybe Bella, do you have a position here?
Sure. I actually was going to add just a few things to what was already said. So I completely agree with Monty. First we have to have a passion and a vision for the few things that we actually decide to attack. And really what we need to attack are things that we haven't been able to solve independently because we need that ecosystem to actually get us there. But the few things that I've learned in trying to do innovation and having multiple failures along with a few successes is that I think as we develop this collaborative ecosystem, I think that we really need to share and share again, because obviously we haven't solved these problems independently. So, together we actually have lots of depth and diversity in Houston that really very few places on the planet have. So each can bring a different perspective. So I think we really need to build that culture. And then the other thing I learned from watching college students and how successful college students are at achieving these little projects that I'm always amazed at is that we have a lot of barriers. We have a lot of intellectual barriers and a lot of formalized barriers and the formalized barriers often just perceived barriers. And in breaking down these barriers by, medical schools asking, NASA or the tech industry or the energy industry to help solve problems. I think that's one thing in Houston that we haven't done a great job of doing, and programs like this obviously bring it together. And then when it comes to healthcare in general, it overlaps some of what Monty's saying, but I think we have to embrace new models of data sharing. We are data heavy, but we're really data poor when it comes to the healthcare industry. And I'm talking about things like socioeconomic data to clinical data to genomics. We need to figure out how to bring all this data so we can actually provide improved healthcare delivery to our patients in Houston and around the world. And then lastly, I think we should always embrace ground up design in that we need to, whatever we design really needs to be from the people at the front end. So we're making their lives easier and making it an error-free, safer environment. So I'll stop there.
No, that's a good point. I'll open it up to anybody else on the panel for an opinion. Please jump in. I think one thing you both mentioned was we can't boil the ocean. There's a lot of things that we could solve through collaboration, but we need focus to really be able to deliver. When you look at opportunities that exist, what types of opportunities really benefit from a sort of cross-collaborative approach here? Maybe Rajesh, maybe give us your thoughts around that.
Sure. That's a great question. In my perspective, in academia particularly, we tend to focus on our own disciplines oftentimes. But in academia, there is always a strong push towards cross-collaboration and interdisciplinary research. It has always been one of the four frontiers in our priorities. It clearly shows that great ideas can come from when different disciplines collide in a way where there's a lot of learning opportunities for both parties or more than one party. I think in a similar way, if we anticipate different sectors to collaborate, for example, academia, industries, even startups per se. I believe when the problems are broader and when the problems have significant impact to technology or to the society, for example, agricultural innovations. We Prairie View is one of the two land-grant institutions that heavily invested on agriculture. But when we look at innovations in agriculture, we all know we have been doing agriculture for centuries, right? But with challenges ongoing, what can we do innovatively that has not been done within the discipline, but we collaborate with a different sector for bringing in additional innovations that were done? So I believe problems such as those that are broader would provide more opportunities for cross-sector collaborations. Biosecurity, for example, it's biology, but in the day that we live in, you have to depend on security, biosecurity, computer science, artificial intelligence. They all have to come together from different sectors to address a broader problems that has significant impact in a sector or even in a society. So that's one aspect. But at the same time, I wouldn't deny if problems that are even too specific, that are very niche problems to a core part of a sector, it's often looked at by experts within that field. So so it may be a beneficial aspect, of course, through a dedicated effort by leadership or the team or the bringing in the culture to look outside their traditional practices. So those are the two ways I would say problems can benefit through cross-sector collaboration, and having opportunities like TCC is a great resource to bounce off. Hey, would this problem be of interest? Just to gauge in different areas. So those are the couple of things that comes to my mind right away.
That's great. No, thanks, Miguel. Maybe the same question to Jaime. Obviously, Jaime, in your role with Shell and Game Changer program, I said it's a very mature program. It's been going, I think, 20 something years. What types of projects or platforms do you look for when you look for collaboration partners?
Yeah, thanks, Dave. So I give maybe some specific answers in a moment, but first I just like to set a bit of a context. So in Shell, we have really gone through a major change of mindset, if you will. We used to, years ago, we used to always think about, can we solve those problems internally? And then if you want to go external to collaborate, you need to find a reason why. And that has totally shifted. I think quite a few years ago now, we say the default should be collaborate. We should have low threshold open innovation. And if we say we don't want to do that, you have to find a reason why we have to just build internally. So I think that's quite major. And it's in recognition of the boundaries of different sectors are blurring. There's just a huge amount of resources that the external environment provide that we can leverage, right? So we put a lot of intentional effort into leveraging that external environment. And there are probably two ways we do it. One is cross-sector, right? So we are in the energy industry, but at the same time, we know we can benefit from advances in the software industry, for example, in the tech industry, in the space, aerospace industry, in the medical industry. So we have done a lot of projects, cross collaboration, not only specific projects, but also the way of working. For example, in the energy industry, some of you know that in the past, the project cycle is very, very long, but now agile ways of thinking that we take from the software industry is now really deeply embedded in how we do technology development as well in Shell. So that's one, just from other industries. And secondly, is also across different type of entities, right? We collaborate with academia, we collaborate with startups, we collaborate with mature companies as well. So there's just a lot of different ways to collaborate as well. And we should always start by asking ourselves, how do we forge the most effective partnerships to develop technology together rather than go along and doing internally. And then back to your question, initially very specific. I think there are just a lot of areas cross-sector collaboration can really benefit. I probably don't need to mention, say, digital transformation, right? There's just should really be no difference of a digital transformation, say, in our company or in a company that in the same sector or even other sectors that we are going through. There are a lot of commonalities there. And also the broader theme of energy transition, which is front and center in our thinking and in many of you thinking as well, that can really benefit from collaboration, not only for the technology piece, but also even, from the piece of, say, we are all suppliers and customers to each other when we think about energy transition. The concept of prosumer is now is quite in the mainstream now. Yeah. So I think just to summarize, we should really think from a collaboration and find a reason not to do. If we decide not to. There has to be a very strong reason, say why you cannot do it.
Mhm. Yeah, no, completely agree. And I think the industry or industry in general has pivoted extensively, I would say, to really start to really embrace external technology leverage. I think, especially when I look at it from our perspective, from a Champion X perspective, historically we've done most of our R&D in-house. We are pivoting quite extensively now and setting targets around external technology leverage, especially when you look at the energy transition. A lot of the technologies and the skills that we need are actually not going to be found in-house. The majority of them are going to be found externally. And so then it's a case of identifying the right partners there. And maybe that brings on onto another question here. There are a lot of potential partners out there that you can actually work with. There's a huge startup community, there's academia, there's established companies as well. You typically have to go and kiss a lot of frogs before you find your prince, really. Maybe a question to Larry here. Tell us a little bit about how you've gone about sort of trying to find that ideal partner. How do you find the prince amongst the frogs here?
I appreciate that, David. And let me tell you, I have quite a few warts from all that frog kissing myself. So I understand how that works. I've been in this cross-industry collaboration mindset for almost a decade now. And it has been very beneficial for my organizations, my customer organizations. But you're right, David, it is a challenge to find different companies to work with, whether they're an academic organization or a private sector firm or even a government agency. To me, the key is culture. Does the organization have a culture of collaboration? Because you could have individuals within that organization that want to collaborate. But if there are internal barriers to collaboration, whether there are legal barriers or cultural barriers or whatever it might be, then no project is really going to get off the ground. And it's going to cause a lot of strife. And you're going to wind up being basically just, frogs kissing frogs. And so, it's critical to find organizations that are participating in these type of events, like the Houston Technology Rodeo, like the TCC, like Pumps and Pipes, like Rockets and Rigs. Is the organization willing to invest their time and their resources into these cross-industry collaboration associations? And if they are, then that's a major green flag right there. So, go and get involved in these type of organizations, be involved in the TCC, be involved in Pumps and Pipes, be involved in Rockets and Rigs. Those are all local organizations within the Houston ecosystem. And they have members that want to collaborate. They have members that are interested in bringing those resources in-house or taking their resources and sharing them amongst the different part of the ecosystem. So really, for me, the first and foremost is to find organizations that are receptive to collaboration. And you do that by finding where they're hanging out, what associations they're involved.
It's a cultural fit, as you said right at the start.
Absolutely.
Right. What about from a healthcare perspective? Maybe Bella, just maybe share your thoughts on that as well.
Sure. I mean, I would say that what Larry said was right on for healthcare too, that industry there have the culture for innovation. But I also think that, I've also kissed many frogs. And I think that what I've learned is that it's a culture of co-design. So oftentimes we have two groups, one thinking they have the right idea, wanting to impose it on the other one and trying to bring it along. But the culture also has to be of, yes, everything can be different, especially healthcare, because healthcare can be complex even within itself. There can be different aspects that everyone brings to the table, but a culture of wanting to kind of roll up the sleeves and design, and perhaps the product is completely different than both of them envisioned, I think is the types of groups we want to partner with, because we find that those types of companies that not only have that culture, but wanting to understanding that that neither side may have the answer that they're looking for. And then also when we go in to really define a problem that we're trying to solve. Sometimes it's the square peg and the round hole philosophy, but define a great problem and then make sure that you actually have that culture. And after that, you'll find several frogs who have that culture, but then you got to rapidly speed date, because by speed dating, you actually understand what the entire Houston ecosystem has to offer. And then you have to drop kick failure, because you just have to go through and learn, but don't spend years trying to collaborate on something that may not work. Just partner, do a little speed dating, and then hopefully you'll find your prince. I'll end there.
That's great. I'll open up to anybody else on the panel if they'd like to share any other thoughts. Otherwise, I'll pick up on something that Haibin said a few moments ago around really starting to look externally and having that cultural change within an organization. Maybe Haibin, maybe you can sort of elaborate a little bit more around that. Tell us a little bit about some of the roadblocks that you've experienced or you've seen in the industry in general to really be able to make some of those focused steps to really leverage external technology collaborations. Give us some of your experiences there.
Yeah, so I speak from the Shell perspective, of course, and the experience may be a bit different from company to company. One of the characteristic of Shell is that we are pretty large, as you know. So the company is large. There's a lot of different divisions, departments, focus on a very rich set of problems. People with very vast different expertise as well. So that is both a great thing, but also it can be a challenge as well. Sometimes a startup with a really great technology may find difficult to find exactly which department to go to engage with, right? So that would be the first barrier. And in Game Changer, we act in a way as a maybe one of the front doors to help with it, right? So we interact with all the major line of business in Shell, and if we see a startup maybe have a good fit, we try to introduce them to the right players inside Shell. So that's probably one of the barrier. And another barrier, sometimes you would have this not invented here type of mindset, and we gained a lot of experience through the 25 years of history of Game Changer by tackling that. And the key to that is actually very simple. It's about human nature, right? If someone is only involved at the last step of something, then that person always needs time to digest to technology. They need to take some ownership, and that can take time. So we ask ourselves, what if we bring that process to the very beginning? When a company, a startup engage with Game Changer first day, we try to bring the right relevant potential customers within Shell to the conversation. And that really helps a lot, because people will feel, it's not some outsider, quote unquote. It's actually, they are in the process of co-creating the technology together throughout the journey. So the entry barrier is much lower in that. So that would probably be a second one. And finally, it only occurs to me probably a couple of years ago, a realization that Game Changer, because we are investing in early stage startups, we can actually really help managing the expectations as well. So if you imagine a startup just go directly into an asset in Shell, sometimes the asset will understand it, but sometimes they may not. They may see, why this startup, say, did not succeed in the first try, and then it may prevent them from getting a second chance. So we are really, trying our part to do the education and bringing to the internal stakeholders, say, yeah, it's a startup, it's a risky technology, it can have a lot of potential, but it may not succeed the first try. So let's manage the expectation. And if they don't, then they could get a second chance or third chance as well. So I think that helps a lot with the entry barrier for collaboration, especially with small startups.
So I think it's the same question to Monty here. You know, do you suffer from the same thing of not invented here syndrome at JSC? Is that something you
Oh, yes, very much so. And in some cases, it's completely justified. There are things we do in space that nobody else does in them, right? But there is almost always some way to learn from what people are doing terrestrially. And so overcoming that not invented here syndrome is a big problem. There's also the we've already got that covered syndrome, right? We figured that out. We don't need any innovation here. We're doing fine. And then there's the perception that there won't be a good return on investment, that you'll have to spend a lot of time coaching whoever your collaborator is in order to get something out of them. And it's just not worth it. I think, to me, the key part of addressing this is to start to build your culture of collaboration, if you will, independent of any specific problem or solution or anything like that. As soon as you tie it to a particular problem, you're going to get pushback from people that are invested in that problem or in that solution. If you can start to build up, if you will, the reputation of collaboration as a way of easing the problem solving ahead of time, then you lower those barriers. You lower that tendency to push back. And I think that's probably the single most important thing you can do in all of this. There's also the potential, I think, to make use of some form of competition leading to cooperation, somehow giving a small piece of a problem to two different entities and then bringing them together and comparing and then trying to take the best of each, sort of, you know, like moving to an all-star team kind of approach, right? And then finally, we are actually, and I'm not sure I recommend this yet, but we are actually at the agency level giving responsibility for certain problems to independent brokers that don't have anything to lay claim to. They can't have the not invented here syndrome because they haven't invented anything. And we've done that once or twice now on fairly big ticket items. The latest commercial crew stuff is one thing, and we have something else that we're about to do it with. And it does change the game quite a bit. It can enable that collaboration in ways you would not get if you gave the responsibility for that to someone who already felt like they had the right answer, right? So
that's interesting way. I like that concept of the innovation broker. You know, it's interesting when you look at partnerships can take many different forms. Ultimately, what we all strive for, I believe, is ultimately for a win-win type of partnership. Often it doesn't play out that way, but that's what we are going in position always is, or always should be. Maybe Larry, the question to you, give us your thoughts around the structure of how these partnerships come together. I know it's not a one-size-fits-all by any means, but just maybe some things to look out for, especially when you're striving for that win-win.
Absolutely, David. And so, when we talk about the innovation ecosystem in general, and specifically the ecosystem within Houston, Texas, and the greater Houston area, my analogy is like a biological ecosystem. So when you look at a biological ecosystem of a freshwater lake or a body of water, you have the different stratus. You have, the top, the middle, the bottom, and the same is applied to our ecosystem of innovation. The very top layer is what I call the ideation layer, and that ideation layer is where people come together just to get that spark. They're not necessarily maybe wanting to come together to develop a co-development project, but they're looking for that spark of an idea for something internal, for something they can take back to their organization, maybe something they can do on their one specific project. And for those type of collaborations, we have Pumps and Pipes, we've got the Houston Tech Rodeo. Those type of organizations are perfect for that, thinking outside the box and looking at somebody else's toolbox. For a collaboration or an idea. The next level down is really the true collaboration layer. And that's when organizations are going to come together and they're going to look at how they can start forming a team or jointly work projects. And they may work a project that is going to be beneficial to one organization, or they may work a project that actually has benefits to both organizations, even though it's not necessarily the same product. And for us, the TCC, Technology Collaboration Center of Houston is fantastic for that. HX, Houston Exponential, is another great organization for that. TMCX, the Medical Center Accelerator. Those are organizations designed to bring other organizations together in that collaboration. And then the next level is really that value generation level. And that value creation, value generation level is where products and projects are rolled out. And that is where we all really want to get to, but that creates that's a different type of framework. If we're talking startups, we've got great academic organizations, Spark at Rice University, Red Labs at University of Houston. You've got Red House here in Houston. You've got J&J Labs. You've got the ION. Those are great organizations to bring products and services together to actually create that value generation phase. And the TCC actually does, even though I call them out in that middle collaboration layer, the TCC works in all of those levels, helping with the workshops in the ideation level, helping bring organizations together in the collaboration level, and then finally in that third level, creating projects as well. And another one I want to mention is Rockets and Rigs. Rockets and Rigs has done a phenomenal job of taking technology that exists at NASA and then creating and rolling that out into the energy sector. And whether that's putting it into existing organizations like NOV or another type of energy company, or rolling out startups that would actually then go ahead and create a solution. They've done a great job with that as well. So really the key is find the type of collaboration you want, David, whether you're looking for that individual spark, or you're looking for organizational collaboration, where you're really looking to go ahead and generate a new product or service or project, and you're at that value creation level, and then honing in and keying in on the types of collaboration you want to do at that point.
I think it's good. One of the major derailers that, or potential derailers that always tends to come up when you look at partnerships and locking it in place is, of course, you've got all the whole legal side, and then the one which comes up is IP ownership. And I think that's the one which is often a sticking point. How do you handle IP ownership when you're looking at collaboration? Maybe Monty, maybe I pass that one to you and give us your thoughts on how that is handled.
Well, it's interesting that you turn to me. As a government person, I have to say we don't do a lot with IP, right? We generally share our intellectual property freely. We do go after patents sometimes, but that's largely so we can license them to others and give them the opportunity for some competitive advantage. And in general, the two types of IP we have are along the lines of, I keep what I develop, you keep what you develop, or the type of agreement is mostly you get to keep what we develop. And it's so it's kind of we're kind of open door on all that. And I don't think that extends well to industry collaborations. But in thinking about it, I do think that you might make some headway with some well-structured agreements and some sort of exemplar agreements within an innovation and collaboration ecosystem, if you will. Something where at least the normal clauses are all very transparent, everybody understands them. You have some solidified wording that's been vetted by the legal communities involved. Maybe you keep track of precedents where has this been used successfully, and including some sort of mediation process to ensure compliance, so that it doesn't become a brand new lawyer versus brand new lawyer with two startup companies, let's say, or a brand new lawyer with a startup versus the established legal team of a multi-billion-dollar company, right? Let's get it on a level playing field, get it in a structured way. it's kind of just an extension of the rule of law kind of concept, right? So get that established. And if you establish it solidly within a given ecosystem, you might give that ecosystem a real competitive advantage with the outside world. So that's just a thought, though, right? As a government guy. So.
No, it was good. I'm going to ask the same question to others on the panel here, because this is one that I'm personally always very interested in, because we deal a lot with these sort of IP ownership agreements. Maybe Haibin, Bella, I really appreciate your thoughts here.
I'll jump in. Maybe we share very similar as as Monte mentioned from academia perspective, or at least I'll speak up from peer review A&M perspective. We also believe IP should never be a roadblock, and particularly because we spend more time on how we choose the collaborative partners. Mostly based on shared goals and objectives we have. But generally, our institutional goal is to get our inventions out into the world for public good, with certainly a reasonable royalty return of our ownership position. But I think academia will be very similar to the national labs. But again, I also concur with what Monte mentioned, that industry to industry IP could be very different process or expectations.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think at the end of the day, it's just got to be fair. At the end of the day, that's where it's got to be aligned. It's got to be fair for both parties. It comes back to the overall win-win. It's got to be a win for both organizations in the partnership, or multiple organizations. So I want to pick up on something that Larry, you said a few minutes ago around the role of organizations like the TCC, for instance, and the role it plays in helping to navigate through potential partners and helping to find solution providers. Can you maybe elaborate a little bit more around that and the value that maybe the TCC can create for organizations or academics or individual innovators? Interested in your perspective there.
Absolutely, David. So the TCC, as was mentioned by Sadir, began over 6 years ago with the intent of taking excess capacity that was available at NASA at the time and putting that forward into the greater community. And since then, like most organizations, the TCC has pivoted and has evolved. And now we really are able to have touch points in every one of those layers of the ecosystem. And so, almost on a monthly basis, we're having some form of a workshop or collaboration type of event where we're at that ideation level, where we're bringing in speakers and researchers from across industries to talk about a significant problem that is really a cultural and societal level problem. And so we're able to really touch base on that. And through those events, a lot of collaborations and partnerships start, because obviously people have similar interest in that one specific theme, whether it might be sustainable water, whether it might be reliant energy, whatever it might be. And then the next level, that true collaboration level, where the organizations then come together, then the TCC is able to actually bring in innovation workshops. We've actually done multi-day workshops where we have the participants from the different organizations come in and work on their solutioning and their problems. And really, we flip the script. So we try to look at the problems without really looking at the solution, because everybody's got a hammer. Everybody wants to bring their hammer to the problem. But what is the true problem? And is that problem something that is really, that can be value add if these organizations work together? And so the outcome of that would be, do we want to move forward or not? It's a very good, excellent gating event. And it's also an excellent event just to start imbuing that whole idea of collaboration and innovation into organizations. And that third level, that value creation stage, is really when the organizations say, yes, we want to work together. Yes, we want to develop a joint venture, or we want to develop some sort of licensing agreement or something like that, or a startup where we're going to put resources in and then roll something out to create a product or service that will then help address this problem. And the TCC is able to help navigate organizations and individuals in every step of that.
Mhm. Yeah, that's good. Obviously, we've been a member of TCC for the last few years, and obviously anybody who's been in Houston has seen what's happened to the energy industry over the last 5 years. And but we do believe we get a great return on the investment with TCC. Even I'd say even during last year when pretty much everything was virtual, the nice thing about virtual is you can throw a much broader net out there. You know, everybody loves the in-person events, and those are fantastic. You develop great contacts and relationships. But virtual actually has the advantage of you can be much more inclusive as well. So I think the TCC did a nice job of navigating that last year. So let's transition to some real examples of some successes of partnerships that you've each experienced. Maybe I turn to Haibin first. Haibin, you got an example of one in the broad energy space that you'd like to share with the team here?
Yeah, so maybe I'll share a couple just very quickly, given the time. You know, a few years ago, we have a problem that we're looking for a solution. So we have a platform in the North Sea called Brent, right? And it's ready for decommissioning. And then we want to see, you know, what the conditions are in that platform. And so you could do, you know, a number of things, and some of them can be pretty expensive. And you know, we just went out to the community and looked for, you know, if there are any innovative solutions. And actually NASA, Johnson Space Center, responded to our call, and they built a probe to go to under the sea. And it provided a solution that was really cool and, you know, in a very timely and also in low cost fashion. So that was a huge success in my view, and Game Changer played a role there. So at the time it was my predecessor. I'm very happy for that. And a recent example, a more recent, is one where we collaborate with, you know, a startup company called the Air Company, and it's a really cool company. It's based in Brooklyn. So essentially, they do direct air capture and turn the air into, you know, different type of products. Right now, they are making, for example, vodka, and that has been sold in restaurants and liquor stores in the Northeast and some of the cities. They also made hand sanitizers when COVID started, and that was a huge hit as well. So it's the same technology. It's all about getting carbon dioxide from the air and then turn them into products. So we are now working with them to look at potential pathways into what we are interested in electrolysis as well. Right. So this is to me, it's just a true example of it doesn't matter in the end, you know, what you are making. If the technology components share some commonality, then yeah, let's collaborate and see whether we can do something together.
That's some great examples there. And Haibin, you'll be invited to my parties going forward. So thank you for that.
Yeah, I can bring a few vodkas with me.
I love it. What about from the healthcare perspective? Bella, do you have an example maybe?
Sure. I think that, you know, when it comes to healthcare, our key focus is always saving lives. And three quick partnerships that we learned from other industry all the time. So we learned a lot from NASA when NASA had the Challenger issue and all the work around how do you develop a safer environment. We actually adopted. Most of our safety comes from nuclear industry. We actually had to go to nuclear industry and the automotive industry to actually try to figure out how to redesign our healthcare platforms to develop the safest care. And then recently we've been partnering with tech to do predictive analytics to predict which patients are going to fail before they fail, so we can actually rescue them earlier. So, you know, partnerships, weekly, monthly, daily, you know, we're always looking for how we can improve healthcare delivery.
That's great. And I think we'll round off this section with Monty. You've got an aerospace example. I know there are a plethora of examples there at JSC. So.
Well, actually, the best example I can come up with is probably always going to be Robonaut, which was a humanoid robot that we worked on with General Motors, our JSC Robotics folks did. It's illustrative of what you can get out of collaborations, though, because really the needs of spaceflight and the needs of automotive manufacturing are not very similar, right? But they do have some commonalities. The technology needed to solve some of the problems involved, it's even more similar. And you got a huge amount of synergy between the different groups, partly because of the similarities, but largely because of the differences, right? They were able to look at things in different ways and apply different techniques and learn from each other. And it really made the team working Robonaut an extremely powerful team. And they came up with this really marvelous robot that's served as a flagship for a lot of robotics at NASA. I think it served as an inspiration for a lot of robotics work around the country. And it's done us an awful lot of good in terms of underlying technologies to be applied for other than humanoid robots as well. And we're even actually using Robonaut, replicas of Robonaut at various universities around the world as kind of a test bed for software development for robotics. So that, you know, the students there can actually work with a real humanoid robot and make it do the things they want it to do. And so it's really been an incredible resource for us that came out of it. I'm not sure I know what all GM did with it as the humanoid robot, but I would bet money they've used a lot of the underlying technology on their production lines over time. So
that's great. Yeah, and I think it also looks really cool too. You know,
it does.
Yeah.
It does. And we've got even some cooler looking ones follow on. So Valkyrie is really cool looking too.
Hey Mark, just a time check here. I know we're right at the hour. Are we up on time, or do we have 5 minutes?
It's going wonderfully. So we certainly got another sort of 5 odd minutes if anybody can wishes to maybe say some closing words, or maybe there's a question you haven't asked yet, David, that you feel might be a good
I've got one more really, maybe to each of the panel, and just in terms of your as Houston is really growing dramatically in terms of the ecosystem, the innovation ecosystem. You know, what are you most excited about when you look at what's happening here? Give us some thoughts about what you're most excited about, and if you had a magic wand, what would you do differently? Just to wrap this section up here. Let's start with Larry.
I definitely appreciate that, David. So, you know, being involved in Houston innovation for most of my career, what I'm really excited about is the fact that we are going beyond our traditional realms and traditional industries. You know, if you look at the natural capital that we have in the greater Houston-Galveston area, we have a tremendous amount of available funding. You know, we really have innate to our area more than we need. We don't need VC from Austin or Dallas or San Francisco or Boston. But the challenge with the capital we have here is it's typically locked in family offices or organizations like that come from a traditional energy background. They have made a tremendous amount of money. They've added so much value to the organizations and their families. And they know the risks and the rewards of that industry. But what we need to do is educate them on the risks and the rewards of other technologies and other industries so that we can unlock that existing capital. And that, to me, really is going to be the true match that launches and lights everything here in the Houston, when we can start using our own resources and not draw from those resources up on either coast.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. Maybe Nagesh, I'll give you the last word on this one as we wrap it up here.
Thank you, David. I appreciate that. You know, as we all know, you know, across the globe and particularly in Texas and in the greater Houston area, there's a lot of investment goes into academia by the university, by the system, by the region, by federal agencies, and so on. So there is a lot of knowledge capital resides at higher education campuses. in downtown to greater, Houston area. I look forward to see an ecosystem where corporations and industries would capitalize on this knowledge base, where so much of investments are ongoing, and build that pathways, so it is easy to take all those innovations, ideas, intellectual talent into ways where we can impact the world, and of course benefit financially along the way, and then help startup companies to emerge. But certainly that's something that I really look forward to see, and I see the momentum is ongoing. Having worked in various geographic locations across the nation, Houston is pretty much all roads leads to Houston. That's what I believe in, and that's what I look forward to see in the upcoming years.
Well, what a beautiful way to wrap up the panel, Nagesh. Thank you for weaving that in. All roads lead to Houston. I think everybody on this panel firmly believes that. So a big thank you to the panel here. It's been my privilege to host this. Thank you, Monty, Bella, Haibin, excuse me, Nagesh and Larry. Really good session. I really enjoyed it. So with that, Mark, I'm going to pass back to you and Sudhir.
Thank you, David. Yeah, and thank you to the panelists. That was excellent. Sudhir, we're moving on to session 3.
Wonderful. So I know we can't, well, somewhere out there, I can hear a lot of applause. So let's give a big applause to this wonderful panel. Thank you very much, David, for coordinating an excellent panel. Let's move on to the next part of the agenda. And here is where in session 3, we thought, let's discuss a little bit about the strategic themes which excites right now the Technology Collaboration Center. And on the basis of that, both for the panelists and equally important for the participants. At the end of the day, as we mentioned, the Technology Collaboration Center is a member-driven organization. Members exist in various ways. There are large organizations like some of the ones that you see in the panelists. Monty, for example, represented NASA, and that's the organization where it originally started. We had a 5-year, as I said, Space Act agreement, which went from 2014 to 2019. And based on that strength that existed and the success that was delivered by the Technology Collaboration Center as an internal customer to NASA, the Space Act agreement was extended for another 5 years, co-executed between Mark Gehr, the ex-director of JSC, and myself, representing TCC. And then we've just moved on. How it originally started was the use of wearable technologies. Let me try and share my screen so we can see the next part of our program. There we go. Mark, can you see it?
Very good, thank you.
Wonderful. Yeah, so as part of this here, we'll go down. So I'll start off with explaining imaging advances. One of the ways we thought we'll pick up these themes from a technology collaboration center perspective is, at the end of the day, it's about leadership and commitment. And as you can see, each one of those themes is led by somebody who is extremely passionate about that theme. Giving my example, I'm extremely passionate about imaging. Right from the time I came into the industry, one of the first things we did in the field operations is imaging an oil well to give our clients answers like A, does hydrocarbon exist? B, at what depth? C, in how much amount? And most important, will it flow naturally to surface or not? And there exists so much analogy. So I'll explain about imaging. I'll be followed by David Horsup, who will talk about water quality. We'll then move to David Kerr about robotics and automation. Monty with one of my favorite topics, wearable technology, close to everybody's heart because it's a program that we do year on year, right from the time when the Technology Collaboration Center was formed. Megan Parks about carbon mitigation, and Dr. Asif Ali will give a nice end to this session with digital health transformation. So a quick look at imaging technologies, and I go back to obviously in all of our lives, we've attended a lot of sessions. We've participated in a lot of sessions, either as audience or as speakers or as moderators or as panelists, etc. If I have to pick up, let's say, the top three forums that I have been introduced in, this one that you see on your screen is extremely close to my heart. One of the reasons is just the feedback that we received from the participants, but equally important, the feedback we received from all these distinguished panelists who were there. One common resounding feedback which we received from all of them was the fact that they have never been involved in a forum wherein an expert from the energy industry, and here is a representative example, a very good friend of mine, Dr. John Edgin, who is a distinguished advisor geophysics at BP. Dr. Donald Pettit, astronaut and NASA, who has been to the space station multiple times and conducted fluid physics in microgravity experiments on the International Space Station. Dr. Juan Lopez Matei, assistant professor of cardiology and radiology at the University of Texas MD Anderson Cancer Center, an absolute guru on imaging technologies. A lot of you know in the aerospace industry, Dr. Ashok Sargasyan, who handles international medicine liaison at KBR. And then Emmanuel Urquita, who is our board member, who is closely connected with TRISH, Transitional Research Institute for Human Space Health, working very closely between Baylor College of Medicine and NASA, looking at how, or not how, looking to make sure that that trip, which humans eventually will make to Mars, a multi-year trip, typically lasting 3 to 4 years, I guess, a year to go, a year to come back, and a couple of years to stay there, is defect-free. Looking at the 4 or 5 key risks which exist there on the way, including radiation, including confinement, including microgravity, et cetera, et cetera. So was an absolutely wonderful organized conference. And this kind of conference essentially gave us the confidence that when you're talking about these themes, they go across the industries, and everybody learns, because a bunch of times we are so much in our own silos that we forget that it's the same problem which exists on the other sides. For example, MRI, the same technology which is used in the healthcare industry is used so much by us in the, and when I say us when I was closely associated with the energy and oil and gas industry to find out various kind of fluids at various levels within the oil, within the wellbore. So what is a wellbore to us is a blood vessel to the healthcare people, is the racetrack to a passion which is very close to my heart, Formula One. It's the same kind of fluid dynamics and same kind of CFD principles which exist across the board. We continued that with a second day program, which was divided into two parts: imaging application analysis and imaging processing, led by, again, a wonderful team of experts, quite a few of them part of the program committee. So moving ahead, our plan is certainly to try and continue to see collaboration between these industries, energy, medicine, space medicine, etc. Because as we said, the challenges are similar. You just see from what angles you come across to solve a problem which exists. That particular conference was absolutely wonderful and laid the foundation for future such dialogue that we will continue multi-industry between these various organizations and other organizations which will join the team. Yeah. With that, I'll just give a quick roundup of the fact that we formed, and what you see here is not only for the imaging team, it's similar template for the rest of the teams as well, which my other co-speakers will tell about the teams that they lead, that they are passionate about, and that they'll be talking about. Each of one of these will form a program committee. We'll start to have workshops. So like I had mentioned right at the beginning, we have quite a few forums by which we connect with the industry. We started at the beginning of this year what is called TCC Live. This is kind of a quick fire, once a month theme that we pick up a half an hour to 40-minute program wherein we bring in an expert from the industry looking at a theme, and they talk about it, they share their experiences and connect with the audience on questions that they might have. This then leads to obviously concierge services, and hopefully as an outcome of that, one of the key initiatives we are putting together is an internship program to give an opportunity to interns from the academia come and engage with us and be part of us, either as part of their credits, either as part of their package, or either as part of their experience as they transition into the industry. So here we lie to give various avenues for people to engage. Yeah. Hopefully I gave a quick snapshot to imaging. Let me now go ahead and hand over to David Horsup to tell us a little bit more about the water quality. I suggest we hold back on any questions that might be there. So Mark Sangster is keeping an eye on the chat session to see if there are any questions coming in. And Mark, I leave it to you. We have a few ways to do it. Either at the end of a couple of sessions, we might take a pause and answer some of those questions, or at the end of Dr. Asif Ali's presentation, we can open it up for all of the panels, the entire panel, to then go ahead and see if there are any questions. If there are no questions from anybody, then please feel free to go to our website. There is a button that you can click, info@techcollaboration.org. Those questions go straight to Mark. Mark and I discuss every week on the various things that we want to do at TCC. We have a standing meeting and we'll address each one of your questions through that avenue in case you can't put up your question today. Thank you. David, over to you.
Great, thank you, Sudhir. So I'll just tell you a little bit about the strategic water theme. As Sudhir mentioned, we have a number of strategic themes, which is really how we focus the collaboration that we have across the TCC and beyond. So if you could just pull up the slide there, Mark, that'd be great. So really, the water, you may ask, well, why water? Well, water, as I think everybody knows, is fundamental to life on this planet as we know it today. And there are many places around the world, parts of the world, which are water stressed. In fact, by 2025, there's going to be 1.8 billion people that don't have access to fresh water. So there's a humanitarian aspect to this. There's a huge industrial aspect to this. Fresh water is fundamental to many processes. About 2/3 of all fresh water is used in agricultural uses. And to optimize the usage of fresh water in industrial processes is absolutely critical. Whether that is in the energy industry where water is being produced, but it is also a critical element in being able to produce oil, okay? And so it is fundamental that we adopt responsible water utilization processes. You go back one slide, please, Mark. So what the availability of fresh water is critical. You know, the industry in general is so heavily focused around ESG metrics, environmental, social, and governance metrics. The headlines is always grabbed by greenhouse gases, absolutely, and we all understand why. But following close behind that is fresh water and access to fresh water. And corporations are facing significantly increasing ESG pressures from their investors to really address some of that. So, but within the TCC, we called out water as a strategic theme. There are specific areas that, from a technology perspective, that are critical. Okay, and we call out some of these in the bottom right-hand side of the slide here. So things like technologies for water recycle, more efficient water recycle. Online sensors for measuring water quality, whether it's measuring, for instance, total dissolved solids, or whether it's measuring oxygen content, or in situ chemical analysis or bacterial analysis in water. All of these are critical areas if we try and manage water holistically. And then, of course, the whole area of data analytics and artificial intelligence, when it extends to optimizing water systems, is absolutely critical. So that's the reason why we called out water. It crosses so many different industries, and the technologies that are needed are somewhat translatable between different industries because it's water as the medium here. Go to the next slide, please, Mark. So how are we trying to address this? Well, first of all, it's really understanding from our member organizations what are some of the technological gaps that we're trying to address here. So the articulation of the need is absolutely front and center. Okay, making sure we're focused on the big items, not on some of those which are around the periphery. And as Sadir mentioned, you know, there's the concierge service whereby members can actually put a challenge out there. And a number of us as member organizations have done that, and the TCC will help to actually try and identify potential companies or solutions or entrepreneurs that could actually address those challenges. And we've had water workshops. The actual photograph at the bottom was one we hosted here at Champion X actually a couple of years ago, or 18 months ago now. And we had probably 75 people in attendance, and really drilled down to some very specific deliverables. And as I said before, we got great value out of a workshop like that. We identified actually 4 startup companies that we then continued discussions with to evaluate their technologies. So again, the TCC acts as the node to bring all of this together. And then the idea of having a grand water challenge, that's something we're looking at the moment, a grand water challenge that attracts solvers to really try and address. And then the other thing I just highlight is we're in the process of setting up a water technology board. And so what that is, it's a small group of passionate, I call them water evangelists. People who are passionate about solving water problems, okay, and thinking about problems in a different way, and can look across different industries and help to try and connect those dots. And so this water board will be absolutely instrumental in really helping to solve specific water challenges, to be able to identify companies or academics or individual entrepreneurs that may have a solution that could address some of the strategic gaps that have been identified through our member organization. So it's really a wonderful way for people who are really passionate about water to get involved. So if you have a passion about water and really would like to be on this technology board, please flag it so we can reach out to you, because this ultimately is how we're trying to drive collaboration across the Greater Houston location here. So I'll keep it short and sweet, and I will pass back to is it David? Are you going next, or whoever's next in line?
Perfect. Thank you, David. David Horsu. Mark, any questions so far, or shall we move ahead?
Let's move on, and I think I've fixed the problem. We had a automated transition on the slides, and I think that's affecting everybody. So we should be good to go with Monty now, and I can control the screen.
Okay, should we go with Monty next? Okay, Monty, over to you, and on to, like I said, this is a theme which is extremely close to the heart. I must say, this is a theme which made Technology Collaboration Center. So no pressure, but you are going to talk about things which are extremely passionate to every single one here within TCC. Over to you, Monty.
Thank you very much for that calming introduction. Now go ahead to the next slide. So wearable technology is pretty near and dear to my heart too. But I'll just keep talking, and you can pull the slides up as best you can. So the industry, the wearable tech industry, has been booming for a long time now. There's tons of money going into it from lots of different sources. And it's addressing different fields of study. I tend to divide it into about 4 categories. It's addressing information from the human body, the physiological information, information near the human body, so somewhat localized, localized environmental information, getting information to the human mind, perhaps through visuals, perhaps auditory stimulus, perhaps even haptic stimulus. And then physical augmentation, so things like exoskeletons, which might be aiding in lifting capacity or any number of other things. We're going to see these investments continue. There is a tremendous drive towards these investments from a terrestrial standpoint. And from a NASA perspective, we're in a situation where we want to be able to harvest these investments, harvest the results of these investments, and perhaps influence them in some cases. So the next slide, please. There is a lot of synergy with spaceflight challenges. For instance, on medical care, monitoring astronauts is somewhat similar to hospital or home monitoring for terrestrial patients. I know 25 something years ago, I had to have a heart monitor and wear it for about 36 hours. It recorded data on a cassette tape of all things. It couldn't take any more than 36 hours worth of data. A few weeks ago, I ran into a friend of mine who had literally been monitored for, his heart was monitored for about a month, and the information was telemetered back to his cardiologist. So his cardiologist could make the decision that he could get off of rather extreme blood thinners after a procedure he'd had done a few months earlier. That wouldn't have been possible 25 years ago, and now it is. But I will also say that this gentleman was incredibly looking forward to getting that damn thing off of his body. So he did not want the little pads on him. He didn't want to carry the holster thing around. He was ready to be done. And that tells you we have a lot further to go there, right? Getting things that are comfortable and unintrusive. Medical research is another one, quantifying relationships between physiological phenomena that could not be objectively measured previously. And that would include the localized environmental measurements as well, things that would allow us to correlate, let's say, headaches a person was suffering, or perhaps irregular heartbeats that might correspond to a high CO2 measurement nearby. That kind of thing could be very useful to everybody. We've done a lot of stuff with the DoD that's more of an integrated nature assessment of an individual's fitness for action, not just what physiological measurements are we getting out of them, but also are they mentally sharp? Are they alert? Are they ready to go do this? And that's something we share from a spaceflight perspective for both our astronauts and our flight controllers, and the DoD has for any of their active duty personnel. Then there's the more generic kinds of things that kind of cross a number of industries and applications, keep out zone detection and alerts, things like on-person displays, and I mentioned audio, and even simple controls, which could get more complicated as we get smarter. And then finally, I'll address heads-up displays, which I think folks are familiar with. I mean, there's some out there on car windshields, and of course, jet fighter pilots have them as well. There's also heads-in displays, which are very different in terms of the technology required. This is more the Iron Man kind of displays, where you have a helmet and your focal length is much different, and the technology necessary to project onto the helmet is very different. And then augmented reality would support or be supported in both of those kinds of displays, as well as the VR goggles and that kind of thing. Things like using augmented reality to just help steer someone to execute a maintenance procedure. In our case, we've got a maintenance procedure on our treadmill in space that we're doing this with. There's also medical procedures that we're looking at doing it with, and actually partnering with, I think, Baylor, to try and figure out how best to do that. Next slide, please. So let's talk a few of our NASA projects. The first one I'll bring up is our personal CO2 monitor. I kind of alluded to this earlier. We have had issues with crew on board space station getting unexpected headaches and certain other physiological problems. We thought that might be because they were getting into what amounts to dead space in the atmosphere of the space station where CO2 had built up. So we basically outfitted them with a CO2 monitor on the back of their neck to try and find out if they were in these CO2 bubbles or not. And I think the result was not, but still that was useful to eliminate that as a problem area. We're expanding this to include multifunctional crew monitoring, things other than just CO2, and adding in physiological measurements and that kind of thing. So we're trying to build ourselves a more an on-body network, if you will, of wearable sensors. Another example is the RoboGlove, which was actually somewhat of an extension of RoboNaut, but it's a way of augmenting a person's grip strength. And then even more importantly, once the grip is made on a given object, freezing their hand such that they never relax, basically. So they are supported, they are locked into place. And that's something that actually I think some of the manufacturing folks are very interested in, because they do run into such problems with their personnel carrying around heavy loads, and the weak part is your grip strength. So that's something that we've been doing, and for us it would help tremendously with EVA gloves, because they are so difficult to clinch. Having something that augmented your grip strength is very important. Jarvis is the heads-in system. It includes some additional things other than just heads-in display. It includes voice recognition and some level of haptic feedback as well. And we're looking at that to add to our next generation spacesuits. I did not put the acronym there, but y'all can kind of figure out where it came from, I think. And then we already are doing a lot of wearable tech on board space station to gather physiological data for different tests we're running on our astronaut subjects. And then last slide, please. And so I wanted to at least touch briefly on our TCC activities. We actually started wearable technologies as a cluster, and I don't remember what the acronym stands for, but it was basically a grouping of academic researchers and institutions. We started that back in 2013. We had a lot of student teams tackling different requests that we would make through the cluster, and we would bring them in and demonstrate and do a lot of show and tell once a year. We transitioned that effort to the TCC in 2017, and then the TCC also added industry participation, which has been quite useful. And so that was something I think our folks really appreciated as a service from the TCC to help bring all that together. And then the 2020 and 2021 events were canceled due to COVID. I think we're hoping to get them restarted again in 2022 once we can get back into a full year cycle from academia. And then from a future challenge perspective, there's a lot of people developing sensors for custom devices. We're going to have to figure out how to make that work for us. The multi-user heterogeneous device environments, lots of commercial folks are coming up with proprietary answers. How can we make those different proprietary answers work for us in space? Because we can't carry one of everything. And I would point out that people are putting sensors into shoes right now. Lots of different kinds of sensors for different purposes. I think we want to be able to do the same thing with our moon boots when we land back on the moon. And we got some work to do there to figure out how to make that happen. That's a real custom application for a wearable sensor, right? And I think that's all I have for right now. So, and by the way, I did not turn out the lights. It's getting dark outside. So.
It's getting very dark. So dear, I'd appreciate it maybe if you just say maybe a couple of words on the wearables and how important it's been to the TCC while I get this next slide set up. Thank you.
Say that again, Mark.
If you could just say maybe just one or two words, just how important the wearables have been. That it really has been, a key, one of our key workshops.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, this is where it's one of the ones that originally started being just a one-day workshop. We found strong interest from the universities. Unfortunately, because of the pandemic, we couldn't do it, but and a very much sought after kind of event is the second day, which is the university challenge, wherein 35, 40 universities join in with teams, etc. And talking about that, I just have an idea in the future, if people like Dr. Asif Ali and Dr. Bela Patel can come in as part of the team who looks at all of these challenges which come in. I tell you, a lot of those challenges challenge us as well, and some wonderful innovative ideas coming from top-notch universities around the United States. We've also started to receive interest from international universities. Herein lies an opportunity wherein you look at that and what's in interest for NASA in general, and Johnson Space Center and JPL was the fact that it's a direct connection with the outside world, with startups and with people on wonderful ideas which can come up, which can then be developed. Yeah.
Okay, we're good to go.
Next, Mark, is Dr. Asif Ali. Should we have him go next?
Yeah, just a quick word. Yeah, great to have Dr. Asif with us. So he has been on Fox and Friends and numerous other sort of TV shows, Dr. Oz, around the country. And so I think this is just another one to add to your resume, Asif. But obviously he is one of the premier cardiologists in Houston, has been a chief medical officer as well as various chairs in various Houston hospitals. He is the president of Harris County Medical Society Western Branch as well. But I think the most impressive thing about Dr. Ali is he is truly a doctorpreneur and has been involved with multiple startups as well as very large companies, which I'll let him explain. But a real pleasure to have him on board of this medical strategic theme. So I'll fire up your presentation.
All right, thank you so much, Mark, and Sudhir, thank you, TCC, for having me on today. And I'm here to talk about digital healthcare transformation, this strategic theme. So I have a unique position as a clinical assistant professor at UT Medical School, but I'm also in the private sector and have worked on as chief medical officer for 5 digital startups. All are national And the last one that I've been working on has really impacted over 5 million lives in the COVID era, both from diagnostics for COVID vaccines and tracing as well. One of the common themes that I'm going to talk about here is, solving problems that are public health issues. I did a master's in public health, and most of the companies that I work for as chief medical officer are public benefit companies. They're really looking at major issues that are impacting society. And what attracts me to work with some of these companies is that it does involve collaboration with both medical and non-medical personnel. And this actually brief time that I have with you today is right on the cusp of, I just spoke at the American College of Cardiology exactly on this topic today about a wearable cardiac defibrillator that has been spanning both diagnostics and therapeutics to reduce the incidence of sudden cardiac death across America, which is the third largest killer in America. With that said, borrowing from all of these startup and technologies and collaborations with engineers and academia and translational research, and then taking it all the way to commercialization, which we have done. What do we talk about as a very broad topic of digital health transformation? Well, that's really looking at delivery of care models, establishing what those care models are, and collecting data and platforms. And again, I can span everything from diagnostics to therapy. And it's about collecting those insights in the databases and creating action plans to solve a problem and ultimately taking a plan of action. So there's a lot of barriers, however, in the digital health transformation. And I think medicine as a whole has been one of the slowest to adopt these digital health solutions. It's not that long ago that doctors were still using paper charts. And so with the era of now digitizing and bringing in EMRs, the EMRs were not set up, should have been set up, but were not set up for this key factor of interoperability. How do we have different platforms speak to each other? How do we take wearable devices? I used to be Fitbit's medical correspondent, worked with a lot of med tech companies, but how do we take all of this data? And my colleague, Dr. Bella Patel, was talking about it very well earlier, which is, looking at data, good data and bad data. I actually call it death by data, making sure that the data that we're collecting will actually transfer to actionable items. And I always teach my medical students, residents, fellows, don't order tests, don't order diagnostics unless you can predict what that answer is going to be, and ultimately, how is that going to change your management? So as we look at this collaboration, I think, really looking at public health issues and ultimately the end result, which is how is that going to change the direction or the management of these individuals? And that has to be based on data. If we go back one more slide, and I'll finish up this slide, but that has to be really done by data, predictive and preventative analytics. And we have a whole host of different devices, and there's actually now CPT codes and CMS reimbursement in parity laws for telemedicine, remote patient monitoring, and even one of my startups, we're dealing with diabetes prevention programs using digital health. And all of this has to ultimately be value-based for reimbursements to occur, and that patients are given the opportunity in this era to collect data. And this whole advent of patient care, we need to remove the barriers, which is patients' compliance, and create systems in place where patients are collecting data without even knowing it. Next slide. Thank you, Mark. And so I think the digital health transformation strategic theme that Mark had discussed with me is really imagining that if we did have an interoperable world in the medical space, the Internet of Medical Things and COVID had struck, we would have been able to collaborate, track, and make decision-making way ahead, way early in a preventative model rather than a reactive model. And I think that's, part of what TCC is trying to do, which is, figure out how to be more connected, how to be more interoperable, and how to be more preventative in making decisions early on before clinical outcomes occur. How can we mitigate those ahead of upstream rather than being reactive to them? And so Mark had asked me on this last slide is, everyone collaborating and getting involved with the TCC upcoming digital health transformation. And in Q4, really looking at that cross-industry launch of how the different industries will be collaborating. Right now, we have Dr. Bella Patel and myself involved on the medical vertical with some other individuals who will be joining us before Q4. We'll have some workshops with the TCC live event and forming these committees and hopefully engaging the academic sector with young professionals so that we can create and measure impacts across this digital health transformation spectrum. And with that, I thank you for your attention and appreciate the opportunity to talk here.
That's fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dr. Ali. Like you said, it's all about the good data, and some of the stuff you talked about, gosh, we reverberate so much with us, my previous desk, which was in energy and oil and gas. So I think we have a healthy discussion to have when we are ready for that forum, which we will do related to digital transformation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next, Megan, over to you.
Great, nice to be here. How's my audio?
Fantastic.
Loud and clear.
Okay, great. Well, I am standing in for my business partner and co-founder, Henk Mooiweer, who serves on the TCC board. I am the co-founder, along with Henk, of Grassroots Carbon, which is a public benefit company. And what we do is we help leading companies thrive in a carbon-constrained world by storing massive amounts of carbon using the power of nature. And both Henk and I come from an energy industry background. I've got about 2 decades in the energy industry before I left to found my own consulting firm. And Henk had 25 years with Shell working on innovation and invention there. So this strategic theme is about carbon mitigation. And Mark, you can go to the next slide. I need to make this bigger so I can see it. So why carbon mitigation? I think anyone who reads the news today in any way, shape, or form related to business has an answer to this, or is just in general concerned about climate change. It seems that the inability of governments to really address the climate issue has led to companies and corporations and many others in the not-for-profit sector getting involved in this space. On this slide, to somewhat address the why on carbon mitigation, one thing we often do at Grassroots Carbon is we will show this kind of decision tree, putting ourselves in the shoes of our customers who are corporations who have a carbon challenge. And they have a lot of options of how to address that. So when you go beyond reducing your own direct emissions, many companies are coming out, it seems like a new few every day, making commitments to be carbon neutral or even carbon negative or even net zero in order to help the world deliver on what's going to be a safe level of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. So on the tree, you've got everything from, you start with reducing your own emissions, but then for the residual amount that you cannot reduce, many are going beyond and are trying to offset that footprint. So in the world of carbon offsets, most of the offsets that are sold on the voluntary market today are actually these avoidance offsets. You can pay someone to not chop down a forest. You can pay for renewable energy credits. but increasingly there's a view towards looking beyond avoidances into actual removal. So people have brought this up before earlier in this session. Let's talk about how do we actually remove CO2 from the atmosphere, because we don't have a lot of time. And so in looking at carbon removal options, there are technology-based carbon sequestration options. You can do CCNS, carbon capture and sequestration in reservoirs. Those of us from the energy industry are very familiar with this here in Houston. There's also direct air capture, right? Putting out the big carbon sucking machines. You can capture atmospheric CO2 and turn it into, using chemistry, into building materials and other useful things. But many of these technology options are simply not mature and ready to scale at the pace that's needed. So that's one of the reasons why I have a carbon mitigation scheme or strategic theme in the TCC, because it's going to take a multitude of different entities working together to commercialize and scale some of these technologies in the time frame needed really for the world. And so where we're working in our startup company here, Grassroots Carbon, is on the bottom of this decision tree on nature-based carbon storage. And most people are familiar with forestry. You can plant new forests, or you can change how you manage forests to sequester carbon in trees. Everyone's familiar with that. And then at the very bottom, we have soil carbon storage. And that's actually what I spend my day job working on these days. And most people don't think of the soils. The carbon sequestration in soil is not even counted in a lot of forestry projects, but near surface soils actually hold a very large amount of the total carbon budget of the earth. It's second only to the oceans. So near surface soils, the top 3 feet of soil, I always like to give this plug, have more carbon stored in them than the entirety of plant biomass on all the earth. So all the trees, all the plants and grasses, everything. So that right there is an example of one carbon removal technology, if you will, that really is hardly even discussed in the conversation about carbon mitigation technologies. And so one of the things that the TCC is doing is bringing together various parties to explore this strategic theme and develop new partnerships to work on it. So before I go to the next slide, I'll just mention a couple of things, at least that I'm aware of, that TCC has done on the topic of carbon mitigation lately, in particular on nature-based carbon removal. We had a virtual workshop in last fall, and the process for those, we've also had, I think I spoke at a webinar last month, but the virtual workshop tends to look at identifying what are the options, like similar to the decision tree I just showed, identifying what are the hurdles and barriers that are keeping these technologies from catching on, scaling up, and becoming available for use at the pace that's needed, and then to just work on solutions together and, solve what is really, I think, a shared interest that many of us have in basically pulling CO2 out of the atmosphere. So I wanted to highlight one in particular cross-industry collaboration that has been birthed in part because of the kinds of conversations and relationships created by TCC, and that is the Gulf Coast Carbon Collaborative. It was founded in 2019 by a number of companies, including utility companies, energy companies, chemicals and manufacturing. And then our company, Grassroots Carbon, and a couple others were also founding members. And that is a multidisciplinary collaboration aimed at trying to help scale some of these technologies so that they are actually available to be part of the solution set for companies and others who are trying to decarbonize. There are 6 working groups. There's one on hydrogen, there's one on nature-based sequestration, electrification for the utilities, and there's one on water and carbon, because it's very hard when you work on nature-based solutions to separate water and carbon. These aren't separate issues, it's really one and the same. So that's an initiative that is co-sponsored by the U.S. Business Council for Sustainable Development. Anyone can join. So if you're sitting here in a startup or in a university setting and you want to be part of that, just Google it and go to their website. It's really a great way for companies and others who want to experiment with pilot projects to dip their toe in the water of some of these technologies in a very low risk way in partnership with others. So I think I'll stop there.
Thank you, Megan. Absolutely fascinating to see, some of these technologies come through, and I feel excited of this fact that some of these things probably we can take from Earth into microgravity, where people will start to look at long-term sustainability and try and see how we can combine those two things together. I think we have a tremendous opportunity to look at something like that, and with Monty's help, I think he'll help us get there. So wonderful. Thank you. On to, one of the best for the last. So over to you, David Kerr, with one of, again, my favorite topics, robotics and automation. David, over to you.
Thanks, Sudhir. Can everybody hear me well?
Yes, thank you, David.
Okay, great, thanks. Just do that feedback real quick. So
You might
I'm
want to
gonna
come
talk about-
slightly closer to the mic, David.
Okay, we've got to get a little closer. How about now? So I'm going to
Yes.
talk about artificial intelligence, virtual reality, robotics, automation as a strategic theme. My name is David Kerr. I'm with Jacobs as their manager of external pursuits. And what my job really is to interface between JSC and NASA and non-NASA entities to bring opportunities to collaborate between the two parties. Next chart, Mark. So I kind of stand in between academia, industry, and NASA. So why AI, VR, robotics, and automation? This area is active. Right? It's really active. Things are happening. Things are moving. But this is good and bad. Why is it good? Well, because we're solving problems. We're coming up with new approaches that can be used for various domains. But it's also bad because there's so much happening, it's impossible to keep up with. So TCC can help us in this. Can help you to share knowledge, to be able to spread the word, so to speak. There's a tremendous amount of work going on within AI, VR, robotics, and automation within the aerospace, healthcare, and energy. Academia is pushing the state of the art in these areas as well. You've probably seen the recent Perseverance Martian landings, and probably have heard about the 7 minutes of terror, where a vehicle's got to land on its own autonomously, using automation, more than likely using AI and other concepts that could help it do that successfully. Additionally, we also see where VR is used to, the healthcare industry is using smart prostheses devices being more commonplace. Smart devices, automated haptics and the like, so need that type of device for themselves. Healthcare is making great progress in those areas as well. We also see that there's robotic pipe handlers on oil rigs becoming more and more popular. So the automation theme and the robotics theme is prevalent across all the domains. We've come to learn that our member domains have similar interests in outcomes, whether it's using automation to increase safety. Safety across the board is an important theme for most of our organizations that we deal with. And also for training, using VR for training. Astronauts to train for their missions before they ever go up into space, training surgical students on a medical procedure, or maybe even an upstream energy worker on a new system source, or even immersively teaching a college student about astronomy. Great VR use and spread across the different domains here. Another purpose of our theme is to identify in-theme and cross-theme advancements and applications. For example, member universities are continuously innovating AI solutions for various applications. other member organizations and event participants are exposed to those new approaches and can apply those to their own challenges. Additionally, cross-theme advancements are discussed. For example, an oil and gas company, for example, may develop an object recognition machine learning algorithm that may be applicable to a virtual reality trained product or an augmented reality application for exploration, or maybe even be used in a robotics vision system for use in a future application. So there's plenty of opportunities for cross-pollination here. All these things can happen if we take our own perspectives from our own domains and talk about our challenges and talk about our solutions, how we arrive at them with people in other domains. The TCC is here to foster those conversations from different viewpoints. So all we have to do is look at a history of cross-industry collaboration to see successful results. A JSC propulsion engineer, an expert in moving fuel from a tank to a rocket engine, had a heart attack here in Houston. He met Michael DeBakey, and together they eventually built one of the first ventricular assist devices ever made. Lonnie earlier talked about GM and JSC robotics collaboration on Rodeo. The benefit there was robots working next to humans on the factory floor and the International Space Station safely. Two JSC robotics colleagues formed Houston Mechatronics. I think we heard from them earlier in the day. Currently using their product, Aquanaut, for subsurface operations in the oil and gas industry. You may see here there's a Robonaut for the space applications and an Aquanaut for subsurface applications, born of the same group of people. Another example is a group of JSC and Jacobs engineers working on the ISS exercise equipment vibration isolation, which is a huge problem if you're trying to run on a treadmill up in microgravity. You can imagine that the vibration that the astronauts are inducing while they're running is propagating throughout the space station and may break it apart if not isolated. They took that knowledge and built a solution, bassinet, that reduced the neonatal vibration while being transported by helicopter. So neonates, in certain instances where they're transported from rural locations to the city, are being harmed more by the ride in the helicopter than not. All these success stories, by the way, happen in Houston. Next chart, Mark. Okay, so what have we done in the past? We've had meetings. I won't repeat the things that I've said before, but we've had meetings, we've had presentations, we've had in-person events. We're moving more towards more TCC live networking opportunities, virtual events that seem to draw a lot more people. We've got some fourth quarter workshops coming up, and we also facilitate specific topic discussions. This is a pretty broad theme here, so we can get the specifics for what the group is interested in talking about. So what we need to do here is get involved. Either go to the TCC website, contact any of us through our LinkedIn profiles, get involved, and let's start participating in our cross-industry discussions. And by the way, we've all been mentioning, aerospace, healthcare, energy, and academia. But if you're not a member domain, Procter & Gamble, for example, is one of our largest concierge customers. They're a manufacturing and consumer goods company. They use our services and collaborate with us regularly. So please don't limit yourself. Go ahead and engage with us as we can. And obviously, we're going to assist with solution identification through liaisons with academia and startups and other organizations as part of our partnership. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, David. Again, another absolutely fascinating theme, something I think which is which evaporates with us, and something which just like wearables technology will have the legs year on year, because so much is happening in this particular domain right across various industries. So again, thank you very much, all of the team champions as we call them, for each of these themes. And again, like David said, please feel free to get in touch with us. You don't have to be a member. David gave a wonderful example of Procter & Gamble. I'll give another example, Dell Technologies, not a member yet of ours, but sponsors our programs because I think they believe strongly in this movement. And I can go on with a bunch of other examples like this. Excellent. Brings us to the close to the end. I'm mindful of the time. It's probably a good time to wrap up. And this is the time I'll like to invite Sahana, who's been patiently sitting and listening to all of the talks that have been happening through this close to 2-hour session. And I'd like to invite her for this wrap-up session. No, Sahana is not a PhD candidate, and she is not giving her dissertation. This is just sharing of ideas and get it from Sahana to see what she thought of the 2-hour program as a representative member, so that we can take some of the ideas that we've got from today's session and try to implement them on. So Sahana, over to you. I know you've been taking lots of notes.
Thanks, Sudhir. Thank you, panel. This was an excellent discussion. Being a member of TCC and interacting with this kind of technical intelligentsia has been extremely rewarding. I loved the first session where David questioned and the panel's discussion on all the issues that David was asking. It was excellent. One of the questions that really stuck out was the question to barrier in collaboration. And that's something as TCC, we've realized it's really something that we strive to bring about, that we will be the channel to stop that barrier from collaboration, to stop people from thinking they cannot collaborate with industries that are not close to them or something that they don't know, because there are industries that I think coming to TCC, they've realized that they have something in common and they can collaborate on projects that are common. So it's, I loved that Haiben said it's not just the projects of collaboration, but the ways of working of different industries that helps them in their mind of collaborating with different industries. That was an excellent point that Haiben made. And these are the discussions that in your industry or academia or your company, you would have these conversations, but when you come out of it and meet with different industries, you realize that the barriers are the same. It's just how you navigate through them. So that way.
I loved what Haiben mentioned was those two words, paradigm shift, right? Mm-hmm. Paradigm from what it used to be before to where it is today, that need to collaborate is becoming a common way of working. Very well put, Sahana. Yes.
Yeah. So that was a very interesting question and a very layered question. It had a lot of things that you could peel off and really think about in different industries. The other one that I think TCC can play a very important role is the IP ownership question that David brought up, because that's a brilliantly gray area. It is people collaborate, and as Monty mentioned, being a government organization, it's harder for them to do anything but license their technologies. So as TCC, it's one of the areas that we can really delve into. It's one of the call to action type of questions that I thought that we can dwell into how smaller organizations, bigger organizations can license, and not only license, but if they form any kind of collaboration, how could we structure that? So of course, the IP lawyers, attorneys, they think a lot on those lines, but as a structural offering for TCC, that could be a very important thing to think about. So that gray area that he brought was very interesting.
And in fact,
some other point that he had kind of mentioned was, and one of the things which came out, I've been taking a few into it, etc. The things related to SBIR and the number of spin-offs which have happened based on a idea which probably has come up in space, and then you use it so well on Earth. I did not know that the Tempur-Pedic mattress that has become so much popular on Earth, and I see Monty smiling there, but that particular idea actually came from giving a better life on sleeping up at the International Space Station. So like this, there are thousands of ideas, and you just need to Google in to find out the wonderful ideas which are up. Because of the pandemic, I'll just mention one other thing, and then Mark, I think you have something to talk. But because of the pandemic, the Indian Space Research Organization scientists who are working very closely on the Chandrayaan and the Mangalyaan project, the ones unmanned systems which went up to the moon and the Mars, were pulled away to make mechanical ventilators. And within a very short period of time, they used the automation technology for space to create additional ventilators to be available for humans in India. Are a few important spin-offs and thoughts which come up that can be shared between technologies. Sorry, Mark.
No, there was a comment. Just was it the chat around that time was all about IP on the Tech Rodeo platform, and all of a sudden it was addressed, which was very good. But you know, I agree with Sahana. This is an important piece, and while I think, you know, we create the handshake between these organizations and have tended to sort of step back and let them, or certainly their lawyers, fight out the IP. I think we have a role there to really help guide, and I think it was even Hyben might have mentioned, yeah, at least show the what has been successful in the past, and help through that process. Yeah.
Yeah.
What else, Sahana? Next point.
One of the striking points was made by Larry when he mentions the strata. That there is the ideation, and then you bring it to action, and then the 3 layers that he talked about, and how TCC plays.
He calls it the multi-layer sandwich. Yeah.
Well, TCC plays such a good role in that multi-layered sandwich. I mean, we are an ingredient in every layer of that sandwich. So we're not just ideation, but we blend in the sandwich very well. So that brilliant, Larry, thank you for that analogy and the strata. So that was a very, it brings a very good perspective on what the TCC can bring to you.
The eco sandwich, Sudhir. Eco-wich.
Yeah. Well, that's a good, I think we're going to use that now, and that will be protected by TCC IP.
Exactly. Yeah. We can license that.
Yeah, we'll license it. We'll use it. Mark will use it on our website.
Wonderful. Time for 1 or 2 more points before we wrap up, Sahana. You have any other points to bring up?
More than point, I feel like when they say all roads lead to Houston, and listening to all the amazing technologies from carbon capture to NASA bringing in here, we have water technology, wearables, and all this is Houston ecology. So this is really a gem of a place to be right now, to be in Houston, to be involved in these things, to be a first-hand observer of what brilliant things there are that are coming into Houston. And for the future generation, you might see my little kid in the back. So for future generation to see what Houston has to offer is amazing. So yeah, all roads right now currently are just leading to Houston.
Wonderful. Thank you, Sahana. And again, I take the words of Bela Patel, who mentioned in one of the questions that she has asked. It's all about Houston. It's all about data. It's all about making sure that ground up designs and kind of bringing everything together to make sure that it makes meaningful sense. Listen, thank you very much. Before we kind of wrap up, any final from anybody who is here? This has been outstanding 2-hour session today. Any thoughts, any final thoughts from anybody else before we completely wrap up?
I think, yeah, this has been fantastic. I want to thank everybody again. This recording will be available, and I will certainly make sure I capture the Q&A and the chats that occurred on the other platform, and if there's some relevant questions that you might want to answer, I'll provide those. So, but fantastic. Thank you, everyone. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you. And like Sahana summarized, all roads lead to Houston. So welcome to the Technology Collaboration Center. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.